Hello, in this video, we're going to show you how to create a database in Microsoft Access. And to do this, we're going to create blank database. And the first step is to design the structure of our table. And we'll do that by going to Design View. We'll need to save our table and start below the ID. The ID is going to be a unique identifier called a primary key. And from here, we're going to type in the field names. They're going to be common to all individual records. We're not going to put data in here, so it's going to be name. And we'll put a description. And these are all short text fields. And we always type a description of what it is. And this kind of leads us to the data dictionary, which we'll be talking about. Then we're going to save this by going to Datasheet View, and it'll prompt us to save as follows. And then we'll start typing. From here, you can type in Lori Adams, 550 Post Street, San Francisco. And then can tab, that puts us on a new line, and then we start on the next one. Susan Bryan. Notice how the number changes to 2. We'll go ahead and finish this table, and then we'll take up the instructions from there. Okay, so now we have our table, and I'm going to delete this query because I've already done it. I'm going to show you how to do it. So here's our table. We can click on it, and when we see the data, this is a data sheet view. There are 9 patients. Only one of them has a 650 area code, which is what we're going to ask the database who that is. And that's going to be the query. So we create a query by going create over here, query wizard. And we want simple query wizard. And let's put all the fields over there except for the ID. We won't be needing that, so we're going to send it back. And then we get to this step, we're going to modify the query design because we need to put in some criteria. So that would be over here. We'll have to click on this. And you can see over here at the bottom, we have all the fields of our table. So under the row here that says criteria, we're going to just type 650. It will put quotes around it. And then we can hit the exclamation point and run the query. And you can see here it's K. Alter, who lives at 244 Evergreen in South San Francisco, who has an area code of 650. We can then, if we wanted to, print it, or we could use it to create a report. reports are different than queries as they're formatted. Very easy to do. But before I do that, I did want to show you this. The nice thing about Microsoft Access is behind the clicks and the icons is structured query view. And you can see the commands here. Select from the table name, the names of the field, name, address, and so on, from where the area code is 650. In the old days, we used to manually have to type these things. Now with Access, we don't really need to, right? So we can just go back to our view, right? And if we wanted to, we could create a report from this, create again, report wizard. It's asking us to save. And here is another important thing. When you create a report, you can either bring it from query or from a table. We're going to take it from this table. We can click next. If we wanted to sort by all of these, we could do that. Although we only have one, there's really no need. We could sort it if it had more than one. Again, there's only one, so there's really no need. Click next, next, finish. And there's the name of the table, the database, the query, and the report. When you upload this, you'll upload the entire Microsoft Access file, which will have everything you created. It will have the table, it will have the query, and if you created a report, it will also have a report. I hope you found this useful. Please let me know if you have any questions about this. Thank you so much. Bye now.